Good afternoon and welcome to the Midday News on 3FM. My name is Beatrice Adu. The news is also live on Kesme 107.1 FM and across the world at 3news.com. Coming up in the next 30 minutes. Political parties locked up in an emergency meeting this afternoon over missing biometric verification devices saga. Among others, we are live at the EC headquarters shortly. Also, Accra High Court grants expedited hearing in case seeking to compel President Akufo-Addo to accept anti-LGBTQ bill for possible assent. And much later on this program, citizen petitions Office of Special Prosecutor demanding an investigation into alleged extortions in the award of government scholarships. Thank you very much for joining us today. And this afternoon, political parties and the Electoral Commission are locked up in a crucial emergency meeting. Key on the agenda is the controversy regarding allegations about missing biometric verification devices and some laptops. The opposition National Democratic Congress has demanded thorough investigations into claims of missing BVDs, an allegation the EC has refuted. The ongoing meeting is also expected to consider matters for the voters' registration exercise scheduled for May and the Ejuso by-election. Duke Opoku is our man on the ground. He'll be joining us very shortly to bring us the very latest from this meeting, emergency meeting of political parties at the Electoral Commission. Ahead of that, let's bring you this. And a former national president of the National Union of Ghana Students and current deputy national youth organizer of the opposition National Democratic Congress has petitioned the Office of the Special Prosecutor demanding an investigation into circumstances where staff of the Scholarship Secretariat demand monies from applicants before issuing out scholarships to them. The Secretariat has been in the news lately over how it has awarded scholarships to persons who have political links to the governing MPP. The minority, in a latest demand, is asking for the head of the Secretariat to be sacked. We can listen to Peter Nochukotoi, MP for Akachi North and a member of the Education Committee of Parliament.
We have looked at the investigative reports of the Pop Estate and feel that something seriously must be done. There should be a forensic audit into the operation of the Scholarship Secretariat. And for that to be effectively done, the current registrar must leave office. It must be interdicted so that whoever is going to do the forensic audit will not see any interference from the registrar of scholarships. So we have in the view that people who benefited from the scholarship were not needy students. They are wards or children of persons who have held very high-ranking positions in this country, who can afford the cost of education for their wards. If you take, for instance, Honorable Fedible, who was a national chairman of the NPP, who was able to promise or buy 275 buses for constituencies in the country. His wife is an ambassador to Germany for 7 years, 7 to 8 years now. Can you describe those people as needy? No, they are not. Well, you may be right saying that it happened some time ago, so it could happen now. But look at the dimension it has taken. Probably those who are talking about during the NDC time were children of very poor parents whose wards were helped to get the scholarship.
You heard that Peter Nochukotoi. He is a member of the NDC and also a member on the Education Committee of Parliament and MP for Akachi North. We'll return to this story, bring you the petition from the youth about the scholarship issues and some more. But let's return to our first story about that emergency meeting with political parties at the Electoral Commission headquarters. Duke Opoku is my colleague on the political desk monitoring this event for us. Duke, any word on what's happening?
The meeting is still happening as we speak, Beatrice, and they are still locked up in the meeting. and discussions are centering around the missing DVDs, allegations surrounding some missing biometric voter devices. There are also concerns about the upcoming Electoral Commission's voter registration exercise. The agreement is to still stick to the plan of district offices, but there's also another consideration in relation to underserved areas or areas that are hard to reach, particularly in the farm plains and in the northern region. So the meeting is to come out with a formula to know how to site these additional registration centers. Also, the judicial by-election is also up for a discussion. We are learning from the meeting that discussions are hovering around the 30th of April, of the 30th of this month, for that by-election to be held. It hasn't been confirmed yet, but we are told that the dates that are being discussed in that meeting is around that date. So we are keeping tabs until the meeting is done. As you may well know, it's a closed-door meeting. It's not a meeting where journalists are allowed into. So we have come down here at the Electoral Commission, waiting for the meeting to end, and then we will tell you what happened in our subsequent bulletin.
Duke, before you go, and very briefly, I'm wondering whether you've picked information on whether indeed this emergency meeting should address the BVD issues, because the NDC raised that before an IPAC meeting earlier, and at a press conference of the Electoral Commission, the EC assured that there was nothing wrong, and the NDC insisted that the party needed assurance from the EC at this ongoing emergency meeting. Have you picked information on whether this should be, the last meeting that would address this very critical issue for the opposition in DC?
It's one of the issues on the agenda that is being discussed. In fact, there was a letter that the NDC wrote to the Electoral Commission asking for this meeting to specifically discuss that issue. It's a matter that cannot be skipped, but we will know what the determination is when the meeting is completed.
Thank you very much. Duke Menso-Opoku, he's a man on the political desk monitoring that emergency meeting of political parties at the headquarters of the Electoral Commission for us. And we'll bring you an update as and when we have it. Now, Accra High Court has granted an expedited hearing in the case seeking to compel President Akufo-Addo to accept the anti-LGBTQ bill for possible assent. South Dine MP Roxanne Nelson Dafia-Mekpo maintains the case has important constitutional considerations and must receive urgent attention. My colleague Joseph Akable joins me on the line with details from the court. Joe, first, was this request opposed by the Attorney General?
Not at all. The representatives from the Office of the Attorney General, once the case was called, and the court did ask whether they opposed to the request for this expedited hearing, the state attorney did indicate that they were not opposed to it. Just a bit of context to this. You remember earlier when the Supreme Court had done the expedited hearing in the case against the approval of the ministerial nominees, this was the case that people had made reference to, that it is also a pending case that the court should deal with expeditiously. You remember the AG had indicated that, yes, he is the one who requested for an expedited hearing in that particular matter. Shortly afterwards, lawyers for the legislature proceeded to the High Court to ask the court for an expedited hearing in respect of the case that they are asking the High Court to compel the president and even the Speaker of Parliament, for that matter, to transmit the bill to the president to accept it and to indicate whether or not he was sent to it within the mandatory 7 days. And so the AG's representatives today did not oppose the application, leading the court to grant that expedited hearing.
And what transpired after this was granted?
They were then called upon to move the motion, and so they had to justify why they believe the court should grant the orders. And so in terms of moving that particular motion, the lawyers for the MP led by Nick Papu Samuado did indicate to the court that as far as they were concerned, they believe that the constitutional provisions in issue were very clear, that once a bill is passed by Parliament, Parliament is required to send the bill over to the presidency. And once the presidency receives the bill, the presidency has to indicate within 7 days whether it will assent to it or not. And so they made a point that there is no room for the president to want or decide not, for some various reasons, not to assent to it, or that he's not even saying that Parliament should, she's even saying that Parliament should not even bring the bill to him in the first place. So they make the point that it is clear under the laws that the president is under a duty to simply accept the bill and indicate his decision. And once that has not been complied with, they believe that this is a matter that the court ought to issue such orders against the president. The Attorney General's office did inform the court that they had some points of law they wanted to respond to the arguments that had been raised, and they needed some time to file and raise those points of law. And so the court adjourned the matter to the 18th of April to enable the Attorney General's office to respond in line with the arguments that they intend to raise against this particular request.
Joe, before you go, there was also another case in court. What can you tell us about that one?
This is a case that was filed by the Democracy Hub and 23 others against the Inspector General of Police and the Attorney General. It's the case that had to do with the alleged assault of some protesters during the Occupy Juliobi House demonstrations. You recall a number of lawyers and other individuals were all arrested. Now, this morning, the case was called at the Human Rights Division of the High Court. The Democracy Hub members and the plaintiffs were all not present. Neither were their lawyers. The IGP and the Attorney General's lawyers were also not present. The court interestingly announced that it was striking out the case for want of prosecution because of the failure of the parties in the case, particularly the plaintiffs, to be present in court. And so that case has been struck out by the High Court for now.
Thank you very much. Joseph Akable reporting live from the court, bringing us updates of that case filed between MP Dafiamepo Nelson Dafiamepo and the Attorney General on the LGBTQ bill. Thank you for bringing us those details. Let's return to that story about the former national president of the National Union of Ghana Students and current deputy National Youth Organizer of the NDC petitioning the Office of the Special Prosecutor, demanding an investigation into circumstances where staff of the Scholarship Secretariat demand monies from applicants before issuing out scholarships to them. I'm joined by Komla Kluche, who has updates for us. Komla, what can you tell us?
Well, the petition has been sent to the Office of the Special the OSP. Well, it's been received, but it's a 4-point petition that has been sent to him. And what they are demanding is that, one, essentially there has been a lot of talk regarding issues on the scholarship secretary. I'm just going to read about two of them. They said that there's been damning instances where staff of the secretariat demand prior payments of commissions from students seeking scholarships before such payments are given. Some beneficiaries who spoke out publicly indicated that they were made to undertake a transfer of a percentage of the approved scholarship amount to compensate for securing the scholarship. And that they've also indicated that the investigation discovered instances where people receive double scholarships for the same course of study in the Secretariat and other institutions. One such individual they mentioned is Dr. Beatrice Adu, who received a total of $50 and $31,000 for postgraduate studies from the Secretariat. So, but then essentially what they're asking for is the fact that the OSP should investigate this because it borders on corruption, and also the executive secretary of the Scholarship Secretariat should be made to resign. This is coming also on the back of the demand by the minority that the Scholarship Secretariat boss be asked or be removed from office.
Thank you very much. Komla Kluche bringing us update from that petition from the former national president of the Ghana Union of the National Union of Ghana Students and current deputy national youth organizer of the NDC. Thank you so much, Komla, for those details. I'm joined by Edem Senanu. He's co-chair Citizens Movement Against Corruption. Good afternoon to you, sir. Thank you for joining us.
And thank you.
I'm sure you've heard the allegations out there, and now the call for the OSP to step in as an anti-graft or anti-corruption campaigner. Really, what do you make of it?
I think without getting into any form of partisan politicization, I think this is a good governance call, and it's extremely legitimate. I've seen the letter. I think it is well-grounded. The OSP is set up to investigate and prosecute corruption and corruption-related cases, either in the public sector or private sector. And there are some indications of potential corruption, which is abuse of entrusted power for personal gain. And so to that extent, I think the call is well-grounded, and I'm glad somebody's taking it up. I actually wish it were the current National Union of Ghanaian Students. You know, when we were growing up, NUGs used to be very influential
in bringing the kind of changes that sometimes the political class were unwilling to do.
Indeed.
But now we don't see that happening.
Are you shocked, though, by the revelations coming out?
Absolutely so. And it seems to suggest that our monitoring, evaluation, or other auditing systems are not strong enough. Because in my mind, if these things were being established and dealt with, in terms of enforcement, we would not have such glaring repetition and impunity. It's shocking if somebody who's at the time that he was a public servant on the board of the NHIA gets a $50,000 support, goes and gets a scholarship there. And this is somebody who's the chief executive of a health whatever facility in airport. It just beats your imagination. So there really are major questions to be answered. And if we don't take actions that set the right messages, people will think that, look, we can just continue doing this kind of thing.
I want to bring in the bit of Parliament. You said that institutions are not working. I remember the last time I spoke with the immediate past majority leader, Chairman Sabonsu. One major issue he raised, which he thinks is a weakness of Parliament, is that the committees don't seem to be doing some works that will help deal with some of these things. How do you see this very concern, as it were, raised by this former leader of the House, in terms of their contributing to institutions that are supposed to ensure that we have 360 kind of checks and balances on our systems?
I think that, yes, it's a very relevant issue. If you take the Public Accounts Committee, the review that they do, recommendations are made that are supposed to be followed up by the RX, the Audit Report Implementation Committees. In other jurisdictions, from the public accounts, you would probably head to court for prosecution or for arrest. And I think we should be able to look at the past and say, you know what, this has not worked. The oversight that Parliament has not immediately translated into sanctions for persons or groups that have been culpable in terms of not managing our resources well. How do we change this? How do we ensure that, look, when PAC makes a finding, adverse finding, it immediately leads to some fast-track action? I think that we need a kind of anti-corruption fast-track court system so that there's much more urgent and robust responses to these issues as they arise. And the precedence, as long as it is right there in the public space, will itself serve as a deterrent to those who think that, there are no casualties, there's no risk involved, there's no penalty when we engage in such acts. And so to that extent, yes. How do we reorganize the connection between Parliament's oversight and the sanctions that come out when Parliament have done investigation, rather than we spend a lot of money and time on this and not much seems to have changed by the following year?
Before you go, you heard a former student leader calling for the resignation of the boss of the Scholarship Secretariat. Yesterday, a member of the Education Committee of Parliament, actually we also heard him today, Peter Nochukoto, asked for the man to be interdicted. What do you think is the approach moving forward?
I think we should still just follow due process. If there's civil service has a legal framework that allows for interdiction whilst investigation goes on, then let's use that. I would align with that because I think it makes sense that given the nature, the very grievous nature of the report, whoever is at the helm of affairs ought to step aside whilst investigations go on. So it may not necessarily be interdiction, you go home, be suspended whilst we investigate. Allow the investigations to be done as quickly as possible, and whatever the findings are, will determine whether we conclude that this person has acted above board or not.
We'll end it here. Thank you very much. And that was Adam Senano, co-chair, Citizens Movement Against Corruption. Thank you for sharing your expertise with us now. The Health Ministry says there's no cause for concern over the clearing of essential medicines at the port. It follows fresh concerns again by the Association of Persons Living with HIV that some $40 million worth of drugs are stuck at the Tema port over COVID and ECOWAS levies unpaid by the government. But the Health Ministry says steps are underway to have the drugs cleared. Public Relations Officer at the Ministry, Michael Ofeba, says concerns about the efficacy of the drugs will also be addressed.
As a ministry, we are also not happy about the development, that no ministry or manager or a director will say that you want to have your name always coming in the media on bad issues. But that also doesn't mean that as management of the ministry is not doing anything about this issue. On daily basis, we will not have the opportunity to come out and tell the general public that this is what and what we have done about it. But I must say that the chief director of the ministry and management of the ministry for now are directly and hardly working to ensure that these drugs are taken out from the board. There have been a number of challenges with regards to taxes that are attached to our delivery system. Now, we cannot only say taxes, domestic taxes. We are talking about ECOWAS levies and all that every country pays. So why is it that Ghana is not able to pay? So what can we do? The issue is to go back to the drawing board, sit down with the stakeholders involved, Ministry of Finance, National Revenue Authority, and then Customs Division. These were a number of engagement we've had behind closed doors to ensure that going forward, drug that we get from donors, not only Global Fund, but even domestic drugs that we may purchase too for our consumptions should be exempted from some of these challenges. And we are fortunate to say that for now, we've been able to break the neck that no drugs coming in for us in Ghana will have such challenges at the port. And we are assuring Ghanaians that by Friday, those 182 drugs that are being kept at the port will be cleared out.
Michael Ofeba speaks for the Ministry of Health. Meanwhile, the Executive Secretary of the Global Fund Country Coordinating Mechanism in Ghana, Samuel Hackman, says that the fund may advise itself if the commodities for the just-ended grant is not cleared from the port.
Long haul of delays and shortages in the system. We need to be on time. We need to be very proactive. We need to be seen as actively pursuing the national strategy, because it's an arrangement between the Global Fund and Ghana, And so if somebody is honoring the part of the MOU, you must be seen also doing same at your end. Mind you, these commodities are not for sale. They are supposed to be plugged into the national system. Free gift. Okay, so all that Ghana needs to do is to up its game, get the structures that we need to be put in place. If there is a blanket waiver, that would have been the best, so that by the time the goods come, because these things are already arranged and planned for, they have safe passages. If we don't do that, and consistently we cause these commodities to expire, the Global Fund may advise us. GC7 is giving us $300 million into our health financing. So if we treat it with this kind of approach, then obviously it is going to be difficult for them to continue doing so. Else there will be fatigue, and that will not augur well for the country as well.
You heard Samuel Hackman. He is the Executive Secretary of the Global Fund Country Coordinating Mechanism in Ghana. You're still here on the Midday News on 3FM. When we come back, we'll tell you what the founder of the All People's Congress, APC, Hassan Ayarga, has been saying. Don't go away.
Freezer, get the abba. Adama for the abba. A freezer. Adama, a craftsmanship. Adama. Make me so, my sorry. Can you know? Obo Moasia. I do for no be a munum and san last night. I don't know what we did. Adama for Adula Crafton who said, yet the Adruba Cope, a ship we be a high technology. I could for freezer. When Kwan, and once open your 15 letters. No fugum, what ya no fugum. What the boss here, if we be any of us, you, equity self, over Timono. Then we sure say, woman shown task here. No matter enough for now, freezer, power up a day, freezer. Dacia, a basson do so among Amoniaji. To me, what's the car? To me, but you may not do a some doom. Adama, with that Adama, no queer. Adama, you can't resist.
Ubenya Adama West Africa for a dream, or baby bear a tongue cry on way you. I feel Kayona Kinkai in Choya, a dream.
And you're still here on the Midday News on 3FM. My name is Beatrice Adu. Thank you for staying. Now, founder of the All People's Congress, APC, Hassan Ayariga, says that it is too early to conclude who wins the December 7 elections based on a poll. He says a lot can change from now till December 7 when Ghanaians go to the polls to elect a president and members of parliament. Ms. Ayariga was reacting to the poll conducted by Global Info Analytics that puts the NDC's John Mahama as a likely winner if elections were conducted today with 54.3%, whilst the MPP's Dr. Mahmoud Baumia secured 34.6%. Leader of the Movement for Change, Alan Kwejo Tremanting, had 7.5%, while the New Forces, Nana Kwame Bediakon, polled 2.3%. The governing New Patriotic Party has raised concerns about the methodology of the survey. Commenting on the polls on TV3's New Day show, the leader of APC, Hassan Ayariga, said it is too early to make projections using polls.
If the election were to be held today, it will not be held based on 6,000 Ghanaians.
But that's the sample size. And so that should be a reflection of the entire
The sample size depends where you go and do the sampling. That's the most important. Where did you do the sampling? If you go to the strongholds of NDC and strongholds of MPP, the sample size will definitely favor these two political parties against the rest of the political party. Now, over the years, we've all seen several samples in favor of one party or the other, but the election is just, the campaign is yet to begin. So for me, these samples go in favor of certain political parties against, and then it's a mindset. It's an issue of mindset. If I sit down on TV and see that, oh, my party APC is there, and then I don't see a proper percentage, you are discouraging a lot of particular people who support certain political parties and favor certain political parties. So sometimes let's try and wait. When it's getting closer to an election period, very close that all the political leaders have been elected and all the political parties have started their campaign, then you can do this kind of polls. But this is a situation where most of the minority parties have not even elected their flag bearers. Their party members have not started campaign. The issue of these four leaders who have started their campaign. So definitely you'll be getting the polls you want to get or probably favor them your way. For me, I respect their institution. I have no disrespect against them. But I think, first of all, the poll did not favor all the political parties equally. And I think that we need sometimes to look at it very well so that we don't, one way or the other, push Ghanaians to favor certain political leaders against others. Because 2024 election is a crucial election.
Crucial election indeed. APC leader Hassan Ayariga. Meanwhile, the executive director for Global Info Analytics, Musa Dankwa, maintains his outfit uses globally accepted methodology. He's been justifying the poll results.
With regards to methodology, why we interviewed stronghold of MPP and NDC, when you spread voters in this country, most voters come from Accra, then Ashanti region. So the samples are distributed in the same way. You will not see Upper East results coming to over 10 Ashanti region results. It doesn't happen like that. So it has to be proportional to the sampling of the electoral frame, or EC register that we have. So I'm afraid that Dr. Ayariga is saying that we haven't been to stronghold. And again, we don't select areas we go by ourselves. We run a simulation. We have all the 275 constituencies in the computer. We press a button and randomly picks where we have to go to. So we don't get accused of kind of selection bias. And it's the same method that has delivered the consistent result we have been publishing over the last 24 months. So we are quite okay.
Yeah, that Musa Dankwa, he is the executive director for Global Info Analytics, that agency, that survey, putting NDC flag bearer John Mahama ahead in the 2024 general election. And you heard that APC leader Hassan Ayariga challenging that. That's how we end the news here on 3FM. Our top stories. Political parties locked up in an emergency meeting this afternoon over missing biometric verification devices saga, among others. We brought you some information. We'll bring you more later. Also, Accra High Court grants expedited hearing in case seeking to compel President Akufo-Addo to accept anti-LGBTQ bill for possible assent. plus Citizen Petitions Office of Special Prosecutor demanding an investigation into alleged extortions in the award of government scholarships. My name is Beatrice Adu. Thank you very much for joining us today. Good afternoon. Enjoy the rest of our programs.
They are coming from all over the country.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome to Business Daily. Coming up this afternoon, expert predicts 26% inflation rate for March 2024 ahead of Ghana Statistical Services CPI release tomorrow.
So my estimation is that we could see inflation around mid-25, around 26% in March. Then thereafter, it could begin a decline.
Also, Director of Research at the Institute of Economic Affairs, Dr. John Kwache, criticizes Bank of Ghana's cash reserve ratio adjustment and its implication on lending.
And so we put in these mechanisms and framework. Bank of Ghana is also part of the problem. How do you expect this economy to thrive when businesses go and borrow at 30%?
Plus, Ghana Anti-Corruption Coalition raises concern about the negative implications of conflict of interest on Ghana's economy with regard to government officials.
And so we put in these mechanisms and framework to fight corruption. We'll still come back to another, and I'm afraid to say we'll still go back to another 18th IMF.
My name is Menu Afol. We have details of these and more lined up for you in the next 10 minutes. Stay with us. Thank you for your time. In our first story, inflation is forecasted to go up to 26% in March 2024 from the 23.2% recorded in February as the country continues to face depreciation of the local currency among other macroeconomic challenges that affect pricing. Lead researcher at GCB Capital, Courage Buti, made this known in an interview with 3 Business.
So my estimation is that we could see inflation around mid-25, around 26% in March. Then thereafter, it could begin a decline, all things being equal, because the global situation is also still very fluid. The exchange rate situation, a bit stable relative to what we saw. I think, thankfully, we've seen the Bank of Ghana's data. Reserve keeps improving. They are in a better position now than probably a few months behind to support the currency stability, even if the levels fall short of what we knew prior to the crisis, really. But then I expect the CD will go on this mild depreciation tree for the remainder of the year, albeit in a controlled way.
Well, that was the voice of Courage Buti, lead researcher at GCB Capital. Meanwhile, the Ghana Statistical Service is poised to release the Consumer Price Index tomorrow, April 10, 2024. And 3 Business will be bringing you live updates on the inflation trends from there. In more stories, Director of Research at the Institute of Economic Affairs, Dr. John Kwache, has criticized the central bank's adjustment of the cash reserve ratio. According to Dr. Kwache, the move is counterproductive as it will only worsen lending constraints to the private sector. He was speaking at the 3 Business ASEP National Economic Forum on building an economy beyond IMF bailout.
Bank of Ghana is also part of the problem. How do you expect this economy to thrive when businesses go and borrow at 30% or more than that, you know? I mean, you are just suffocating the economy. And then on top of this very high policy rate, they also introduced, well, reserve requirements have always been there, but they were at lower rates. Now they have raised the rates to between 15% and 25%. This means that if a bank takes deposit of 100, it has to deposit 15 or up to 25 at the Bank of Ghana. And that reserve, which is kept there, is not remunerated. How do you expect them to break even? They have to go back and raise lending rates on the 75 or so that they are lending out. So that kind of policy is counterproductive. It is restricting the bank's liquidity to be able to lend, but you are the same Bank of Ghana that is saying that credit to the private sector is also weak.
That was Director of Research at the Institute of Economic Affairs, Dr. John Kwache there. Meanwhile, Executive Secretary of Ghana Anti-Corruption Beauty MFA Nati has raised concerns of conflict of interest in governance, emphasizing the enforcement of assets declaration.
We have this Conduct of Public Officers Bill that has been pending, and if I'm not mistaken, it's now one of the oldest bills after the Affirmative Action Bill. And nobody is ready to do that because it's going to shine the light, because it's going to put in measures to let us be able to document and verify who is coming into government, how they come in, and that. If you recall, the former finance minister used his data bank, which is his business, as a transaction advisor to all the loans that we took. You ask yourself, who does that? Clearly, it's a conflict of interest, but we don't have the law. That's why the Conduct of Public Office Bill was going to help us to regulate properly what conflict of interest is. So until we put in these mechanisms and framework to fight corruption, we'll still come back to another, and I'm afraid to say we'll still go back to another 18th IMF.
You heard the voice of Executive Secretary of Ghana Anti-Corruption Coalition, Beauty MFA Nati there. Away from that, despite signs of economic improvement, Ghana's growth is projected to be slower than anticipated in 2024, according to the World Bank's April 2024 Africa Pulse report. The report forecasts Ghana's gross domestic product to grow by around 2% in 2024. This is lower than previously expected growth. The report suggests a more positive outlook for 2025, with projected growth approaching 5%. My colleague Bismarck Awusa has the details.
According to the report, Ghana and 14 other African countries are expected to record a slowdown in growth in 2024. Similarly, the country is expected to contribute 0.1% to the regional GDP growth by the largest economies in the region. In 2024, growth in sub-Saharan Africa is expected to accelerate to 3.4% and further to an average rate of 3.9% in 2025 and 2026. Meanwhile, the report said the rebound in growth in sub-Saharan Africa is driven by large countries in the region, recording growth rates that are lower than their performance over the first 2 decades. In 2024, the World Bank said growth is expected to accelerate in nearly 70% of sub-Saharan African countries.
Well, that was a report by Bismarck Awusa on projected slowdown in Ghana's economic growth for the year. And that will be all for Business News or Business Daily here on 3FM 92.7. For more business stories, please log on to our website on 3news.com. My name is Menu Aful. Do stay tuned. Black Rasta will be joining for Urban Blend.